All right. Live once again. Taking your guys' questions and talking to you about why you aren't Christian. And so, as usual, guys, the topics I try to stick to are resurrection of Jesus. Did Jesus claim to be God? Is Paul a true apostle? Modern miracles, messianic prophecy. Why am I talking about those things? Well, it's because all five of those lines of evidence bear directly on the question, is Christianity true? Right? And so I would say these are the five strongest lines of evidence that point towards the truth of Christianity. And there are also areas that I've looked at, studied a bit more. And so, again, this is for non-Christians only. You can join the stream, just see the pinned comment in the live chat, and we will talk. We will talk about why you are not a Christian and why you need to be a Christian and all that stuff. So I already have somebody queued up here. David, you're up, man. What's going on?
Hey, Testify. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, a long-time listener, first-time caller. This is cool. I think it's cool that you do this. I watch a lot of the other streams kind of from the other direction, right? Like there's like Deconstruction Zone and like the Ian guy, and seems to be a popular thing right now. And then like AP and David
It's the
Wood,
thing to do. It's the thing to do.
Yeah. Do you ever go with AP and David Wood when they do like the Muslim call-ins? I think Fan and IP do that too.
I've been on a couple lives with David, but only just like responding to videos. And so yeah, I've never been on. I've been on God Logic. We talking to Muslims and Mormons. We actually talked to more Mormons and Muslims that day. But yeah, just basically just been starting this on my own channel. So,
Cool.
Yeah, man.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know. Like, I know. I guess you shared recently that you had a kid and all that. So I like listening to you. I feel like I relate to you. So that's cool. But yeah, I'm kind of in this weird position where I am like surrounded by Christianity and I see the positive effects of it, but I just can't like bring myself to, I guess, believe all of this stuff.
Okay. What's holding you back?
I mean, it's all like, I don't even know where to begin. It's like none of it seems probable. Like a lot of times when I listen to you talk about stuff, I'm like, okay, I see what he's saying. Like I see how it's possible, but I'm like, is that even plausible or even probable? You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like maybe my bar for evidence is too high or something. I don't know.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with having like a high bar for evidence. It just depends. And so, like, for instance, like in the case of like the resurrection of Jesus, right? What we want to rule out there is that people are making honest mistakes about identifying Jesus. They're not just like hallucinating something or imagining that they're seeing something that isn't really there. Maybe they're all, having some kind of like a religious experience, fervor kind of thing. Well, that's not positive evidence necessarily for the resurrection that they really saw a physical person who came back from the dead, right? And so we want to be able to rule that out, right? Honest mistakes. And then we also want to rule out lies, like, are they lying, the original witnesses lying, or did maybe someone come along and like embellish the gospel accounts to make it look like the original appearances were like a lot stronger than they actually were? And so if you can rule that out, then testimony should be enough, right? What a lot of people will say is, well, this is like kind of the David Hume argument, is there's just never enough testimony that'll overcome like the low prior of a miracle. And I just say that like that's ridiculous, because a miracle is just an object of sense, right? Like you can see it, you can test it, you can test people's claims, you can test people's testimony. And so if you could just rule out that it's not a mistake or it's not people just making stuff up, then it just becomes the best explanation, and then it is what it is. And so you just have to deal with it. And so that's like a real simple explanation of it. I mean, I could get into more detail about why Hume was wrong or something, but really poor argument that I see a lot of skeptics make. You see people like Paula G or Matt Dillahunty that are just like, yeah, it doesn't matter what happens, even if I saw something. I mean, I've even heard Dillahunty say that I would think that I'm hallucinating. I'm not saying that. That to me that's too high of a bar of evidence at that point, right? And so,
Yeah. So I tend to agree with Apologia and Dillahunty on that, where I'd like question my own senses first, and then I had this weird dilemma because it's not that I don't even necessarily believe in like a creator or God, or maybe like I'm a deist or something, right? But
hmm.
I guess I'm like, why am I this way? Why am I not convinced by the same things you're convinced by? Like, am I choosing that? Like, that's not free will, is it? Like, am I choosing to be convinced? Like, are you choosing to be convinced? You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, you could psychologize yourself, or you could psychologize others, and kind of uh, be at a place where you're just kind of frozen almost.
Right.
I don't want to say like paralysis by analysis or something, but you could psychologize yourself to the point where you're like, am I being overly critical, or am I being undercritical? Are other people being undercritical and I'm just normal? Or am I being overly critical and there's something wrong with me? I don't think it really matters ultimately. What matters is just looking at the evidence. And so if you want, I mean, I can talk to you about any one of these topics, but
Yeah.
like for instance, resurrection, I think that's like probably like the big one, right? Like that's the linchpin, right?
Yeah.
And so basically, when it comes to the resurrection, I would take like a different approach than say a William Lane Craig or a Mike Lacona. I don't know. I'm sure you're
Yeah.
pretty familiar with those
You're a
guys.
minimal facts guy, not, or
Yeah,
excuse me, you're a maximal facts guy, not
yeah,
minimal, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not a minimal facts guy. And the reason why is with the minimal facts, basically, I'll just kind of explain in a nutshell. It's basically what Mike Lacona and Gary Habermas and those guys are going to say. And I think even the critics, like even somebody like Paulogia, is right to criticize, is that basically they're just taking what the appearances are described as, which they're not really described as much, in 1 Corinthians 15, that Paul basically is relaying an early creed that the 12 saw Jesus and so did Paul, right?
Yeah.
And since we know group appearances aren't really a thing, or group hallucinations aren't really a thing, I should say, and it's unlikely that they're lying about it because they were willing to suffer. Um, that the best explanation is that Jesus really rose from the dead. Now I'm giving the really crude and rough version of
Yeah.
it. I'm sure
Yeah.
some minimal facts guy in the chat is going to be like, dude, it's a straw man. But basically, in a nutshell, it's just that's kind of it, right? But the problem with 1 Corinthians 15 is it's just a creed. It's just Paul relaying some information, and there's not a lot of details in it, right? Like, what are the appearances like? Did How long did they last? Were they physical or what? We assume that they're physical because they seem to believe in bodily resurrection. But even if they, if it was a 5-second appearance and then he just disappeared, or they saw him floating in a cloud or something, and they're like, wow, that's Jesus. Like, it doesn't really tell us. And so
Yeah.
when it comes to any kind of miracle claim, what we want details. Because the details of the testimony matter, right? We want to be able to rule out honest mistakes, and I don't think that you can do that just on minimal facts alone. And so the approach that I would take is more of a maximal data approach, which we need to work on our branding. It sounds really lame and nerdy or whatever, like we're maximalists, wow guys. But basically we're going to take the testimony of the gospels seriously. And so what we're going to do is it's a two-step approach. And so first of all, we're going to argue that the gospels adequately reflect what the original eyewitnesses claimed. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to show that they're actually highly reliable sources, not just reliable, but highly reliable sources that are written by people who were close up to the facts, that they're very knowledgeable, and they're truthful, right? And so they're in a position to know, and they're honest people, and they know what they're talking about. And so now, if that's true, then what the original eyewitnesses claimed is what they're relaying, right? And so the content of their claim makes it really unlikely that they were mistaken, because they're eating fish with Jesus. He's passing fish to them, right? He's inviting him to touch him, his wounds. He's appears to them over a period of 40 days. They're group appearances. It involves sight, sound, all kinds of different things. And so if the appearances are multisensory, then we can rule out honest mistakes. Now, we could say, well, are they lying or something like that? But the context of their claims makes it really unlikely that they're lying, because they're preaching that Jesus was resurrected from the dead in the very city that he was crucified in 40 days after the event. And then they seem to show that they're willing to suffer. I'm not going to say they all died going, proclaiming this, but I will say that there's good evidence that they were willing to undergo labors, dangers, sufferings, and some of them, in some cases, martyrdom, to go to proclaim this, right? And so that's the basic argument. Now, the real question is are the Gospels actually reliable testimony, or are they have some facts but are largely embellished, right? And so, does that make sense so far?
Yeah. I'm totally tracking. Yeah, and then I think you may be leading to one of the questions I wanted to ask you about, but I don't want to interrupt. Keep going.
No, you're fine. Go ahead and ask the question. You're fine.
Yeah. So one of the lines of argument that you and Lydia McGrew and Tim McGrew, I think John Himmelklatch as well, you guys talk about undesigned coincidences, right? So I guess for me, for whatever reason, me having my high epistemic bar, one of the questions I always have when you guys are talking about that is I'm not sure how to define, or how you define terms. So sometimes you'll say, well, the connection is casual, or, do you get what I'm saying? Do you have more, is there a more rigorous version of that somewhere, where it's all kind of laid out of what the criteria are?
Criteria? My friend Than on Exploring Reality is working on a whole criteria right now. And there's going to be some upcoming papers and possibly even a book. He's working with it's not just Than, he's working with some pretty serious scholars, I believe. I can't drop any names necessarily. So there will be criteria coming, but to me, it makes sense in the sense that we actually see it in history. So for example, there's one from the Anne Frank narratives. I can't remember the names. For some reason, my computer is being really weird. I can't pull up anything. So this stream might be very adventurous. We'll have to see if I end up looking at my phone. The thing is, with history, you're talking about stuff where you usually got to look up some notes. But anyways, but even in the Anne Frank narratives, there was some friends of Anne Frank where one of them recalls when they would arrive to the concentration camps, they remember hearing the soldiers saying, this side and that side. And then there's another one of her friends that remembers Mengele saying, Reichs links, which is right, left. So he's dividing them up, right? He's dividing up the people. But in the testimony of both friends, neither one of them tell us why they're being divided up. But then another one of her friends just casually and incidentally mentions that the young and the old were being split apart, and the old were just immediately being taken to the crematorium, which you could imagine, that's pretty sad, pretty sick. But that's just one of many. Luke Vandewey, who's a New Testament scholar, gives these examples in his book, The Historical Tell. And he gives multiple other ones just from those particular narratives. And so when it comes to undesigned coincidences, they just, to me, they just are. Now, Lydia has tons of videos giving secular examples, the philosophical underpinnings of it all, not just the examples. So you can avail yourself to those videos. She's got a big long playlist. But yeah, we would use undesigned coincidences to establish the reliability of the Gospels. We would use undesigned coincidences to establish the reliability of Acts. We would also talk about external confirmations, which are kind of like undesigned coincidences, but they're just kind of casually interlocked with what we know about secular history. So it's kind of hard to say that's just a result of copying at that point. You know what I mean? And so the fact that there are dozens and dozens of these throughout the text, and not just in multiple different sources that kind of crisscross in all of these different kind of ways, they all kind of point to one thing, that these guys actually were there. They knew what they were talking about. And they're pretty knowledgeable people, and they're scrupulous. They're trying to get the details right. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And so yeah, if you're familiar with the examples, I don't necessarily have to walk you through the examples. That's kind of where I was going.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah. No, you don't necessarily have to do that. It was mostly about just, again, it kind of comes back to this, and I don't want to get navel gazing on you, but I'm like, why does that convince you, but it doesn't convince me, right? It's like there's
well,
something. Yeah,
why
go ahead.
wouldn't it convince you? I guess would be the question. Like, what would be the problem with the argument?
Because the terms aren't defined. It's like, what does casual even mean? I don't know what casual means. What is it?
Well,
What does it mean
casual
to
just
enter
means that
law?
they're just. Yeah, no, that's a good question. No, I
Yeah,
appreciate that. Didn't mean to
yeah,
cut
yeah,
you
you're
off there.
good.
I
You're good.
apologize. And so no, I think that's a good question. Like casual, it's basically they're not trying to explain the other. And so the famous example of like Jesus coming to Philip and saying, "Hey, Philip, where can we buy bread so that these people can eat?" In John chapter 6, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the famous kind of example. Well, John isn't trying to explain where the location of the feeding of the 5,000 is, right? It's just this casual off the cuff remark that he just happens to put. You could say, well, maybe he looked at Luke's gospel and he saw the 9th chapter. I know obviously chapters and verses weren't divided until much later, but he could
Yeah.
just see what Luke wrote and that said that the feeding of the 5,000 was from Bethsaida, and that he notes at the beginning of his gospel that Philip was from Bethsaida. But he could have just like, if that's what he's going to do, he could have just said, well, Jesus asked Philip because he was from Bethsaida, which is where the feeding of the 5,000 happened. But he doesn't do that. It's artless, right? And so you'd have to kind of posit that he's just this kind of super creative. I'm going to really cover my tracks here. And maybe like 2,000 years from now, people will go, ooh, wow, look at that. Or you could just say like, okay, well, that's like actually what happened, right? Like
Right.
this person said this, and then Luke just happens to tell us where the location is. And John offhandedly says that Philip is from Bethsaida. And then John offhandedly has the question posed to him in chapter 6, but they're all kind of scattered across. And it's only like when you do the detective work and put them together that it makes sense. To me, that just looks more like eyewitness testimony. And so it's
Mhm.
probabilities, right? And anytime you're dealing with a
Yeah.
cumulative case, it's just like, is this more probable on the hypothesis that this is eyewitness testimony than is it on the hypothesis that this is it's like subtle invention and redaction and all this other, mythologizing or whatever else storytelling. And
Yeah.
so, and when you have over and over this pattern that you see in multiple places, and then you don't just see the pattern. To me, the strongest ones are really between Acts and Paul's letters, because I know the first thing that people are going to say when you talk
Mhm.
about undesigned coincidences is that they're going to go, "Oh, but the synoptic problem."
Yeah, I was gonna ask you
Um,
about that.
yeah, and so the thing with the synoptic problem thing is like, just because there's partial dependence doesn't mean that there can't be partial independence. So, like a famous example, and again, I'm having to go off of memory. For some reason,
Yeah.
something weird is going on with StreamYard on my computer. Like I'm looking, I can't even see the avatars for half the or the profile
Do,
pics for half
do
the
you want me
picture.
to pull some? Do you want me to pull something up?
No, well, I mean, you can pull it up if you want to, but you don't have to. I got my phone here,
Okay.
so
Okay.
I'll just pull it up and read. And people
Sure.
think I'm making stuff up, then they can just go look at the text themselves. Clever redactor. So Mark chapter 6
Yeah.
in verse 14, right? It says, and King Herod heard it, for his name had been well known, and people were saying, John the Baptist has risen from the dead, and that's why these miraculous powers were at work with him, right? And so here, Mark, and I'm showing why the synoptic problem is not a problem. Just giving one example, okay? Here, Mark mentions what King Herod says, right? And so
Hmm.
if you go over to Matthew, and we do think that Matthew used Mark, right, to some extent, like he could have just used it. Didn't need to reinvent the wheel. There was already a template in place. And you could kind of take a sinister look at it and go, okay, he's just copying Mark basically word for word. And then
Hmm.
anytime he like adds something or changes something, it's this is what you see with like scholars like well, really
Yeah.
anybody. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I did a response video to him, not James McGrath. Anyways, I can't remember his name.
Hmm.
Um, but this is the common thing. It's all redaction. It's redaction. He's changing the story on purpose. He's fictionalizing. And so, but I think he could just be adding information that he knows about. And so in Matthew
Hmm.
chapter 14, it says, at that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard the news about Jesus and said to his servants, this is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead, and that is why miraculous powers are at work in him. So the question arises, and I'm sure you've heard this example before, but for those in the audience who don't know, the question arises is, how would Matthew know in the privacy of Herod's own like chambers what he's saying to his servants? It's kind of weird, right? Well, if you go to Luke chapter 8 in verse 1 through 3, it says, it basically outlines a number of Jesus's female followers who were supporting him financially. And it mentions in verse 3 that one of those people was Joanna, the wife of Husa, Herod's household manager. And so it's plausible that Matthew, being a disciple, would have gotten this information from Joanna, who was basically relaying what her husband was saying. Like, yeah, he was asking us about this Jesus that you happen to be following. Like, there's people working in Herod's house who are married to Jesus's followers. And this
Yeah.
isn't just one example. Like in Acts chapter 14, there's another guy that's named by the name of Manaen, who worked in Herod's household as well. And so now, if you want to say, well, Matthew just added the part about the servants because he was redacting. Well, redacting what? Like, how does that really help the storytelling other than, maybe he thinks that's a cool detail to add, but it doesn't. The better hypothesis, I think, is that Matthew, while looking at Mark maybe, and is like, you know what, this is something that I do know. And then he adds to that story. And it just happens to, Luke is not trying to explain the death of John the Baptist at all. But yet we get this detail of these female followers. And that explains kind of like where the details could have been found. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I see how that you're basically saying like they're corroborating details. Like they're not necessarily like differences, or well, they're differences, but they strengthen the case for the. And I get, yeah, and yeah, I to bring it back to one of the things I was kind of asking you about earlier, it's like, so for me, eyewitness testimony, I'm like, dude, there's eyewitness testimony that Caesar ascended into heaven after and Apollonius of Tyana and like all these other people in the
Oh,
ancient world. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. Actually,
yeah.
Apollonius is not a good example at all. And the
Okay.
reason why is Apollonius of Tyana was written by Philostratus 100 years after the fact, right?
Yeah.
And so I get like within the Gospels, sure, if you even want to take the late dating scenario, most people are going to date the Gospels. Most people, I'll say,
Yeah.
in well within the first century, 70 to 95 AD latest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's still within living memory of the apostles. Now I take more of an earlier dating approach, especially with like Luke, for instance. It seems very odd that Luke is presenting all of these court scenes of Paul being like brought before, Agrippa and Felix and the Sanhedrin and all of this stuff. And then like he stops at Caesar, And so it's not an argument from silence. It's just an argument from the very purpose of the book. And so it's for that particular reason that Adolf van Harnack, who was actually a liberal critic who even rejected the physical resurrection of Jesus, thought that Acts was probably written no later than 62 AD, which would mean Luke would be written before that. And you also have even liberal scholars, atheist scholars like Maurice Casey and James Crossley, who would date Mark even into the 40s for various reasons. And my friend Michael Jones from Inspiring Philosophy has a whole video on that. But basically dating whatever either way. Philostratus is 100 years later. Okay. He talks about his main source is a guy by the name of Damas, who a lot of scholars believe that he's just a literary fiction. And he's visiting places like that were destroyed, like Nineveh, that like didn't even exist at that time. And also, yeah, it's just too late, right? Like it's too late, and it's just not good testimony. And all the miracles that Philostratus is doing, or not Philostratus, Apollonius, excuse me, that Philostratus is writing about, are happening in like places where like the witnesses aren't even around. Like he's in Turkey doing stuff, or he's in like India doing all this stuff. And so at least like with the Gospels, you have like there's a centralized location in one place where it's again within living memory and different things like that. And so I don't think that's like a pretty good example. And so now with eyewitness testimony of like Caesars and stuff, again, what were the details like, right? Again, most of those testimonies of Caesars, ascending into heavens, they come from, and I'm trying to remember the name of the Roman author, it's escaping me at the moment, but they come from like well over 100 to 200 years later, right? And so you don't want like time or great distance. Like those are red flags. When somebody's like, oh yeah, this miracle happened, but by the way, it was like 200 years ago and it was like far away where you can't check it. Like that's a red flag, right? And so here we have miracles that happened in Jerusalem not long after the events are originally being set to foot.
Right. Yeah. So you're
Does that
saying
make
it's
sense?
like kind of a little bit different. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you wanted like I hate to feel like I'm arguing with you because I want it to be more of like
No,
a
you're fine.
conversation. So let me just give you like I guess a counter example. Like, so during the reign, right after Nero died, there were people who were convinced that he was resurrected, and there was like a whole contingent. There was basically almost a civil war because there was this faction backing who they thought was the resurrected Nero, and they like it was just. It seems like it seemed to be a kind of like common motif in that era.
Missing body motif, sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I get it. Yeah, people say that, right?
Yeah.
You would have to show that there's what am I trying to say? Like a correlation there. And so like these are, and I know people would like to argue otherwise, but these are primarily Jewish writings, written by people who either are Jews or have like some Jewish background.
Are
And
you
that
talking
they
about
would
the
be
New
borrowing.
Testament right now? I'm sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt.
I'm talking about the New Testament. I'm talking about the Gospels.
You don't
And
think they're
so,
primarily Greek? So, but they're written
well,
in
yeah,
Greek.
no, they're written in Greek, and I'm not saying that, but I
Yeah.
think there's an argument that Andrew is a Greek name, and that's Peter's brother.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an argument that like Greek was a language that was being spoken in the
You think
area.
Jesus may have spoken Greek?
Yeah, Peter J. Williams shows that it's almost like a certainty that he spoke at least some Greek. And I think his apostles spoke Greek. Matthew's a tax collector. He's working with Romans. He would have been able to probably at least write and speak in some Greek because he has to communicate with these people, right? And so Andrew is a Greek name. Philip is a Greek name. So Jesus' own apostles have Greek names.
Yeah.
And then even Peter J. Williams talks about like the syntax of the Sermon on the Mount and the way that it was spoken, the way that it was easily would have been memorized. Like it's structured in a way that would fit that. You also have Greeks coming in John chapter 12 and saying, hey, we want to speak with Jesus. Well, why would they say we want to speak with Jesus if he couldn't speak Greek, right? There's another part, and again, you could just say, well, John's making stuff up, but in John chapter 7 where Jesus is like, I'm going to go away, and he's like, go away. Is he going to go to the Greeks and speak to them? Well, why would they think that if right? So Nazareth is not far from Sepphoris, and we have all kinds of inscriptions of Greek language and all kinds of stuff in that area.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very plausible. Multiple scholars would argue this, that it could probably speak at least some Greek. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I don't think that they're borrowing these motifs. Going back to what the kind of testimony the Gospels are, the fact that they show themselves to be like extremely knowledgeable, the fact that they show themselves to be close up to the facts, and that they show themselves to be scrupulous. And so what you'd have to posit is like over and over and over again, they're getting like a lot of historical facts right. They really know what they're talking about. Their testimony dovetails in such a way that it looks like eyewitness testimony, but right where we want to say like a miracle happened, suddenly like they're also super creative, and they're using Greek myths to kind of invent stories about the resurrection that didn't really happen. And so now you have a kind of author who's sort of like schizophrenic, right? It's like he's like at 1 minute like super honest, reliable, truthful, and at the next minute he's just like completely fabricating stuff and borrowing from Greek myths and other things like that in order to push out a narrative on the people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it's always hard to figure out what the intention of the original authors was. But when I read people like Justin Martyr, I don't think that they would consider it schizophrenic to say like, you know, for them it's completely normal. Like Justin Martyr accepted that there were the Greek gods, right? And he made comparisons to them. He was like,
No. Yeah, I think that's a misreading of Justin. Again, Michael has a whole video on this. He's basically just saying that like if these things if they do exist, they're demons. Okay. And he's just basically saying like, don't kill us. Like you guys believe and accept a lot of things or whatever. But yeah, so no, I don't think that he's saying like there literally are these beings that like exist. He thinks that they're deceitful spirits or something like that. And so I think that's kind of a misreading of Justin. When he talks about the Gospels, he always calls them memoirs. And so like a memoir is not like I'm kind of okay with you inventing a bunch of stuff too at the same time, right? A memoir would be a memoir. I think Justin would understand what a memoir would be.
Yeah. I guess what I'm just trying to say is that I think it would be, if you think of the audience, right? Because the Gospels were for the Greek Gentiles, right? Like for the non-Jewish Christians, or I mean, who do you think they were written for?
I think they're for a mixed audience. Because
Okay.
I mean, think about Paul. Like in almost all the churches that he's writing to, it's a mixture of Greeks and Jews, right?
Oh, they were, well, wouldn't it be like pockets of communities? Like one church is mostly Greek, one church is mostly Jewish.
I mean, you could say that, sure. I don't think that's possible. I think it's a mix. Like everywhere Paul's going, like Thessalonica, for example, there's a synagogue there. We have archaeological remains of a lot of these synagogues in these areas, and so I think it's a mixed group.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, it's not to be, I hate to be circular or feel like, I don't want you to feel like we're going nowhere, but
no, you're fine.
I keep coming back to this thing of just like, how do I make myself be convinced by something that I just don't find convincing? You know, like I don't think I'll ever, like there's no testimony that I'm ever going to believe. Like, and I know it's human. I know it's human. It's old, but it's like, I agree. That resonates with me. That makes sense to me of like, why would we ever believe what some guy says versus like, you know, like if you know the Bayesian priors, right? Like you like Bayesian priors. So what would the Bayesian prior of resurrection be? Because like, you know,
it just has to be non-zero. It just has to be non-zero for the resurrection argument to go through.
Right.
And so as long as there's a non-zero prior, if you can rule out if this is the kind of testimony that they're giving, and then we again going back to the content and the context of their claims, we just rule that out, and then you get a top-heavy base factor. Now, I understand kind of where you're at. I will go to the next caller here pretty soon, just because we've been talking for 20, and I got a couple others waiting. But I appreciate you coming up. You can come back up anytime. But let me throw this out there for you. And so I will use myself as an example. Is my priors coming into Christianity were very low. And so like I was willing, like yourself, to believe in God. I was like, yeah, that's plausible. And so really, if you think about that, once you put God into the equation, then a miracle isn't necessarily improbable, because if that God wants to make a revelation known, and he wants to do it in a way that we can't just mistake it for some fine sounding speech or philosophy or something like that, then he's gonna probably do something at some specific time in order to reveal himself. And so, but I just thought, well, that's not my experience. And so because it's not my experience, that seems like it would be really, really, really low. Okay. So I would read the Gospels and I would enjoy like reading the teaching of Jesus, because I thought he was like, at least if anything else, he's like this very interesting moral kind of teacher. You know what I mean? But when I would get to the miraculous kind of stuff, like you read like the Sermon on the Mount, you're like, cool. And then you get to Matthew 8 after the Sermon on the Mount, and he's like speaking a word, and a centurion's servant is being healed. And he's like, in the 9th chapter, he's opening the eyes of the blind. And I just thought, well, maybe this is just some kind of like creative storytelling or something. I don't know. It's trying to teach a moral lesson, something. I don't know. And so now this isn't what necessarily convinced me of Christianity. I just ended up having my own religious experience. Okay. I'm not going to use that as testimony for you, because I don't think it's strongly
I wouldn't
evidential.
be convinced by it, to be fair, right? Like you're not convinced by Muslim testimony, and yeah.
Well, there's not a lot of Muslim religious experience testimony that's out there, to be perfectly honest with you. But there is testimony of modern miracles that happen today. And so if there is good testimony of modern miracles that happen today, that has to kind of fill our background information of what the world is actually like. Right.
Yeah.
And so there are a few different cases. I can't pull up my slides for some crazy reason.
Yeah, let's talk about it next time for sure, because I have to go soon too. And
but you gotta go. Okay.
I would reject testimony from modern miracles too. Like I'd be like, no, you have to show me like, evidence, right? Like, so.
Well, there is evidence. That's the thing though. And so
Okay.
if you just look up, let me give you one person to look up real quick.
Yeah, do it. And then can I ask you one question before I drop?
Let me see. Yeah.
But yeah, so while you're looking that up, let me kind of formulate this. It's more so I'm just like, this is one of the things I struggle with, where it's like, you're saying, oh, well, it's probably likely that, God would want to reveal himself. And first of all, I don't even know if I agree with that, but if it was like, why couldn't he have given, what if he had made this book that anyone in the world who approached it, no matter what language they read, no matter if they're blind, they hear a voice in their head, like if they're, I don't know, like there could just be this amazing book that no matter what language, no matter what angle you look at it from, it always says the same thing. It has these just truly amazing, otherworldly, like pearls of wisdom and things like that. Like, couldn't something like that be conceivable? And why? And I guess I'm talking about.
And we could always you are talking about hiddenness there. So we could always conceive of more evidence, right? And so I think that there is sufficient evidence. The 5 lines of evidence that I'm talking about right now, I think are actually like really good and not ambiguous, to be perfectly frank. I think God has made himself clear through these different 5 lines of evidence. And so I dropped something in the chat. This is written by Matthew. What is his real name? Matthew Adelstein. Also AKA the Dillahunty Destroyer. He called on the line one time and just made Matthew look like he was retarded. Not to use the word retarded. I know it's a curse word, guys. Sorry. I grew up in the 90s, so we called each other retard and gay all the time.
We did.
But anyways, he was an atheist. Now was agnostic. Now he's a theist. He's still not fully convinced of Christianity, but he accepts the miraculous report of Barbara Snyder because it's just way too good. So I would encourage you to read that. It's in the live chat.
Yeah,
but basically she had multiple sclerosis, was completely incapacitated, blind, like couldn't breathe, all of these different things, and was instantly miraculously healed when she heard a voice speak to her. And we have medical documentation. It's completely scientifically inexplicable. And there are multiple cases like these that are scientifically inexplicable. They do pass a very high criteria. And I talk about that in my stream on Modern Miracles, which is like 2 years old. If you want to go back and look at that, or just look up Caleb Jackson's stream on Inspiring Philosophy or on Capturing Christianity. I'm not saying I accept all of Caleb's examples, even myself. Some of them, like, I don't know if I'd use that one. But the case of Barbara is like nearly impossible to describe or to explain naturalistically. And there's other ones too that I like to use. And so think about those, and that might inform your background. And I understand you got to go, so I'll quit yapping.
Yeah, no. This was awesome. Thanks for having me up, man. It was fun talking to you.
Yeah, definitely. Come back anytime, man.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Yep. Peace. All right. Pretty good. Maxwell.
Hey, how's it going, Testify?
I'm just keeping it gangster like you, bro.
For sure. First of all, super awesome stream. I think this is great. I think it's great to bring people of faith to talk, and whatever it is, God bless you. I think this is amazing with what you're doing. I love Jesus. He is my Messiah, but he is not my God. So I went to a Christian school. In my beginning years when I was younger, then didn't necessarily walk away from faith, but I could never get behind the idea of Jesus being God. It just didn't make sense to me logically.
Okay.
Didn't have an outlet for it until recently, like a few years ago. Ended up falling in love with Islam, and now I call myself a Muslim, right? And I guess what I want to kind of there's many things I would like to talk about, of course, but I don't want to take way too much of your time.
Mhm.
But I would say like the first one that I guess we can start with the convincing verse that actually made me a Muslim was from like Mark chapter 12, 24, 25, I believe, where the Pharisee says, like he's asking, like, what is the true principles of religion, right? I'm kind of misquoting here, but Jesus says he is Lord, he is one, right? And that confirmed to me the oneness of God. And even the Pharisee confirms that there's no other besides him. And so, I have other thoughts about Christianity, like the modern practice of it, how it's been distorted, but I guess we'll just start there. And, I'm just not convinced that Jesus ever called himself God.
Not convinced he called himself God. Okay.
Yeah.
So if he was speaking in a Jewish setting, like I know he doesn't explicitly do the whole, and this is the common Muslim refrain. I'm not saying this is an argument you would make, but like, where does Jesus say explicitly, "I am God, worship me"? Right. But I think he speaks in like a Jewish audience to a Jewish audience in a way that a Jewish audience would at least pick up on, without necessarily like getting himself instantly killed.
Yeah.
And even when he does say things like explicit, like "I and the Father are one," or "Before Abraham was, I am," what do? They immediately pick up stones to stone him, right? Or when he's before the high priest and he says, the guy basically is like, "Who do you say that you are? Like, just tell us, are you the Messiah or whatever?" And he says, "I am, ego eimi," which could harken back, I think, more than likely harkens back to him referring to him saying that he is the I am burning bush. Uh-oh, you still there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm still here. It's
unfortunately,
unfortunately, I think my Wi-Fi is a little rough. Are you still there?
But then he also says that, yeah, I'm still here. I think it might have been mine. I was trying to pull up, again, I'm trying to pull some stuff up on my computer, and it's just, every time I do it, it's just being weird. So I'll just have to back out of that. Like with the last caller, I'll just have to look at my phone. But when he's talking to a Jewish audience, I think there's a number of different ways that he identifies himself as God. And even in that particular context, he says, "Ego eimi," it's me. And then he says that you're going to see me basically at the right hand of God, Son of Man, coming on the clouds of power, right? And so I think that's a way, what did the reaction of the high priest tells us exactly how he received it. He tore his clothes and said, "You've heard this blasphemy. Like, you don't need to say anything else." And then not only that, but after the fact, they hit him and say, "Prophesy to us, tell us who you are," excuse me, "Prophesy to us who hit you," assuming that he has some sort of omniscience, right? And that's Mark chapter 14, 61 through 65, I believe. Again, my computer's being super weird, so I'm just going to be looking at my phone. And so I think in the Jewish context, there are a number of ways that Jesus does claim to be God. And I could give you multiple examples if you want. Problem that I would foresee somebody like yourself as being a Muslim, and this is where I kind of don't understand the Islamic epistemology, is if it disagrees with the Quran, Jesus just didn't say it. It must be corruption. But if it does agree with the Quran, I think you're frozen a little bit there. Oh, there you go.
No, I'm still here.
All right. But if it does agree with the Quran, those must have been the genuine words of Jesus. And that's like your criteria fulfilled to do almost like biblical criticism, if you will. And so now I understand there are people like Paul Williams who will take a different approach and like try to apply modern biblical criticism to prove a Muslim Jesus. But I just don't think that approach really works very good. I think Bart Ehrman, in his interview with Muhammad Ajab, just made Muhammad Ajab look really, really dumb in that you still can't get a Muslim Jesus out of the four gospels at all.
So
does that make sense?
It makes a little bit of sense. I'll be honest, I'm not the most well versed when it comes to different scholars when it comes or speakers in general, but because I actually kind of looked at your channel a little bit, and I saw that you like have done some rebuttals to like Alex O'Connor, which is someone that I've started to listen to more recently, and
Sure.
now, when like that's like kind of then the crux of the argument when it comes to why I believe the Quran is the word of God, right? I mean, and there's many different reasons. One, like it's if all books were to be burned, what is the only book that can come back in its truest form and in its original language, right? It would be the Quran, because millions of people have memorized it. The Bible couldn't, and the Bible couldn't argue that.
I would disagree there.
Okay,
But
what's
we
your
you want? I mean, well,
yeah,
first
yeah,
of
yeah.
all, I'm not like I would say necessarily an expert, okay, but
Okay.
like which Quran? Like there's different variations of the Quran. There's the Hafs, there's the Warsh, there's meaningful differences sometimes between the two. Then you
There's
also
dialect
have,
differences for sure for different
well, they're more than
Arabic
just dialect
regions.
differences. They're meaningful differences in some cases. But aside from that, I mean, just
But even
depending.
then, if all books were to be burned, right, the only one that can come back, I guess, in its closest nearest form, let's say 95%, 90%, right?
Because of memorization, I mean, you have Jews who have memorized the entire, like, the Pentateuch. You have Christians who have memorized tons of the Bible, and so, I just don't know. That's not like, to me.
To me,
That's
it shows divine protection. To me, like that's what has convinced me. I don't think any other book could argue that.
Well, how
But
would
I want
that
to
not
be.
be? Sure, go
I
ahead.
want you to finish this point, and then I want to go back to Mark as well.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Well, we could just stick with your original point. We could always go back to this
Okay.
if we want to.
Because I want to make sure it's clear and fair for sure.
Yeah.
So when it comes to and so going back to what I was saying about the language, right? The Quran, one of the things that it isn't a clear language, and so if we look at like the Greek, the manuscripts, right? Like since the Bible, most of the New Testament, if not, I think all the New Testament was all written in Greek, right? And the earliest manuscripts that we have were in Greek, and so a lot of these words where it's in English, it says like, oh, he was worshipped, or oh, like he is Lord. It actually, like, if you look at it, it has more of a human mastery, a human, hierarchy rather than like a divine hierarchy. One of the words that you're used that I think we can do easily with the whole Mark chapter is like Adoni versus like Adoni, or it's Adonai versus Adoni, right?
Adonai, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so, like, even then, like, he isn't accepting, or like he's even like, and I think that's about like where David was saying that he is my Lord, and like, and people say that like, oh, like he's using that in a divine sense, but then, the Muslim scholarly argument would be like that's using it in like a higher authority, like a human king-esque, and so I guess what is your response to that?
Well, if you want to go back to the Mark chapter 14, where I kind of started here, so let me pull it up and actually read it.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, he is before the high priest, and the high priest was questioning him and said to him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" So first of all, that would conflict with your Islamic belief. In his response, he says, "I am," which I believe is ego eimi, which could be, I'm not saying it's like 100% clear that he's saying that I am the one that appeared to Moses in the burning bush. But he does seem to say that it's blasphemy. But I think more importantly and more clearly is this: you'll see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, this is an allusion to Daniel chapter 7 and verse 13. So I'm reading Daniel chapter 7 and verse 13 and 14. And it said, "I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like the Son of Man was coming. He came up to the Ancient of Days and came before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, men, and every tongue should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not be taken away, and his kingdom is one which shall not be destroyed." So if somebody is saying that he has an everlasting dominion that will never be taken away, and a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and that everybody should serve him, And so the high priest takes this as blasphemy. He understands what Daniel is. Okay. Now, if you just even looking in the context of Daniel chapter 6 and verse 26, this is something that Darius said after he was thrown into the lion's den. And he's talking about the God of heaven. And he says, I make it a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom, men are to fear and be in dread before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and enduring forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will be no end. So Daniel himself, even in his own writings, quoting Darius, applies the same divine honors, the same divine authority to who the Son of Man is. And so Jesus is going around saying he's the Son of Man. And then right here in Mark chapter 14, specifically, he says, you'll see me at the right hand of power coming. Camera.
Your mic is muted.
I don't know why I got muted there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no worries. I can hear you.
So he's at the right hand of power. This is the same person that he's talking about, the person that all the nations should serve, the one that has the everlasting dominion. And so even in modern Jewish thought, there was this two powers idea of there is one God, but there's also this person who is going to be seated at his right hand, this Son of Man figure who has the honors of God and receives the service that God himself would receive. And then when he says he's coming on the clouds of heaven, the person who rides the clouds in the Old Testament, Psalm 69, Psalm, I believe 104, in other different places, Isaiah 19:1, only Yahweh, only God is the cloud rider. And so this is why the high priest is saying that this is blasphemy. This is just one example, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I would just say, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't have it off the top of my head either, but I am 90% confident, right? When it says to sit to the right hand of power, that's also like another Greek translation of God has given him this like authority over all humans, right? Because obviously as Christians believe and Muslims believe that Jesus will come back as king, right? As king of the earth. And so that's how and so that's why it's my question is, why are there Greek translations or the Greek manuscript, where there's words that are giving him more human authority, and rather than if we just look at it in English, right, it obviously gives him divine authority. But the true essence of the text, the original intent of the text in Greek, was that it's more of a human king, right, above all others type.
It reads the same in the English as it does in the Greek. It's not watering it. It's not puffing it up more, and the Greek has watered it down more. You'd have to provide evidence for that kind of assertion.
Okay. Well, I guess one of the big evidence that I have that I can bring to the table then would be have you heard of Proscanero or Proscanino or
sure,
versus Latrero, right?
But what I'm saying here is Palak. Daniel chapter 7, the word used in the Septuagint is Palak.
Okay.
And so it's not the same.
Yeah, no, of course.
Even if so, it's not the same. And so and again, just the context of Daniel chapter 6:26, Darius says the exact same thing that is applied to the Son of Man about God himself. And Daniel sees no conflict. He sees this as completely consistent.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would love to look into it as well. This is a great example. And so I thank you for that. And so, and maybe that's the one that convinces me, right? And so I'll definitely look into it.
Well, does it bother you at all as a Muslim that even the Quran doesn't seem to understand what the Trinity even is, or that it seems to misdefine it?
Well, it rejects it fully.
It rejects it, but how does the Quran define the Trinity?
That there's no such thing as three. right?
Like say not three, right?
Yeah.
But what does it define the Trinity as?
It defines it as associating partnership to God.
No, I understand that. But which are you familiar? Let me find the verse here real quick. I haven't been looking at Islam as much as I used to. So 573. Do you want to pull that up?
573. Oh,
Yeah.
From the Quran.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, let me actually grab mine.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Now, okay, what's the surah?
It's Surah 5.
Because mine has the English translation, right?
Yeah.
So what number? What is the surah?
Start in 73 and finish in 75.
But what chapter number is it?
Oh, it's chapter 5.
Chapter 5.
Yeah. I should know all the names of the surahs, but I just don't.
No, didn't need to.
Al-Maida.
All right, and then you said so. Chapter 5 starts 73.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sure.
Hear my cat meowing in the background. I apologize.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you got it? Can you read it?
Yeah,
for
I
me?
have it here. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, mine's also Old English, by the way.
That's fine. Totally fine.
So certainly they disbelieve who say Allah is the third. Well, hold on. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Certainly they disbelieve who say Allah is a third of three, and there is no God but one God. And if they desist not from what they say, a painful chastisement will surely befall them, such as believers. Will they not then turn to Allah and ask for His forgiveness? And Allah is forgiving and merciful. The Messiah, son of Mary, who is only a messenger, messengers before him have indeed passed, and his mother was a truthful woman. They both used to eat food. See how we make the messages clear to them, and behold how they turned away.
So they both used to eat food? Who was included in the both?
Mary and Jesus.
Has any Christian ever said that Mary is part of the Trinity?
No, but that's what he's referring to, and his mother was a truthful woman. So God is saying that, first of all, if we want to look at the Catholics, they pray to Mary. Like, I've been to a Catholic church, they pray to Mary.
Yeah,
so
they do.
That's also another claim saying like, hey, like, she's not divine, he's not divine. Mary was chosen because she was such a pious woman, right? And she was birthed Jesus from a virgin birth, and so they both used to eat food.
Yeah, they did. But would eating food make you? Does that understand the hypostatic union?
Well,
does that show any understanding of the hypostatic union at all?
Can you explain a hypostatic union for me?
Well, hypostatic union would be Jesus being fully God and fully man. So this was the creeds that this like established this, like say Chalcedon, for example, or the Athanasian Creed, or different things like that. These were already things that were circulating in Christianity at that time, right? Jesus is 100% God, he's 100% man. And you might say, oh, okay, well, that seems like a logical contradiction or something like that. That's fine, but that's actually like what Christians believe. So eating food would not make Jesus any less God, right? That would just be the basic Christian understanding.
But then that actually goes against like what God even means, like just from its basic form, right? God is eternal. God doesn't need to use the bathroom. God doesn't sleep. God doesn't eat, right?
Right. But what I'm saying is that the Quran at this particular point seems to be developing kind of a straw man against what Christians believe. And if you think I'm like, just look at 116 though.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Should I read it?
Yeah.
Sure. And when Allah will say, O Jesus, son of Mary, didst thou say to men, take me and my mother for two gods besides Allah? He will say, glory be to thee. It was not for me to say what I had no right to say. If I had said it, thou wouldst indeed have known it. So again, this is Old English. Thou knowest what is in my mind, and I know not what is thy mind. Surely thou art the great knower of the unseen.
Okay. So it says right there, did take me and my mother as gods besides two gods besides Allah?
Yeah.
So this again, it seems to be doubling down on a misunderstanding, to me
It's
at least, as an
it's
outsider.
of
That
course if you're trying to look at this from the Trinity perspective, but this is also looking at it from the Catholic perspective.
you think it's looking at it from the intercession to the saints,
For
because
sure.
the Catholics don't say that Mary is a god. The
Of
Orthodox
course not.
don't say that
But
Mary is a
they
god.
treat her like one though.
By praying to her, that's intercession, and they would push back and just say that's asking for intercession. So I'm not saying, I'm not a Catholic, I'm
Of course.
Protestant.
Yeah.
But if I asked you to pray for me, that's how they would define something like that. They would say that I'm just asking, she's closer to God because she's the mother of God, and so, or the mother of Jesus, whatever. And
Yeah, the mother of God. Freudian
yeah,
slip.
yeah. No, she's the mother of God. And so I have no problem saying that, because
Okay.
Jesus is God, right? But if she's close to God, they're saying that they're entreating her for her intercession.
So she's intercession. So, but then that shows a association to God, a partnership to God.
But what I'm saying is
what Muslims would argue, right?
yeah, that's what they would argue. What I'm
Yeah.
saying is at least from an outsider's perspective, when I'm looking at this and I'm seeing that every time where he's talking about don't say three, Trinity's bad, he's always putting Mary in that particular category. Now, I could think, sure, I could take your position, Maxwell, and I could go, well, maybe that's just an honest mistake. Or not an honest mistake, excuse me. Maybe that's just talking about Catholics just venerating Mary to a point where she's almost like God, and that's just too far, right? But then in 920, where's it at, where it talks about Ezra? It's in chapter 9. I should know these off the top of my head. Like I said, it's been a while since
Hey, dude, you're doing great.
Verse 30. Yeah. So when it says that the Jews say that Ezra is the son of Allah, and then it in the very next breath says the Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah. Such are basic assertions, only parroting the words from earlier disbelievers. May Allah condemn them, how they be deluded from the truth. And so to me, it seems like the writer of the Quran is continually making some kind of a misunderstanding, because he is attributing Ezra. Where do we have any record whatsoever of any Jew designating that status to Ezra?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'll look into that. Maybe that is text that was changed over time, right? Maybe it wasn't, right?
You think that could have been changed in the Quran over time?
No, not changing the Quran.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I'm saying that the Quran is coming here to make things clear, right? Maybe this was stuff in the 8th century, like 8th century, 9th century, more
like locally only.
Yeah, this is from ego opinion based.
No, you're good.
I'm throwing out accusations here, but
yeah.
I would say from the first points, right,
Mm-hmm.
where you're saying that where the Quran is attributing it to Mary and Jesus, right? It's the notes, like writer's note, like the person who translated it, and I'm and all of the different I wouldn't say all of the different, but I would highly assume that this is more attributed to the Catholic belief, where they maybe even Christians of the time, right, were using thinking of Mary as a god, but the Trinity is known as as even in the Quranic perspective is Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and then as well as God.
I don't
and
see
and
that.
I'm sure I can even find where it even talks about the Holy Spirit as well in the Quran too.
It talks about the Spirit in the sense, but a lot of Muslims will even say that's Gabriel.
Yeah,
yeah, and it never talks about. Yeah, it never talks about the Quran. I'm pretty positive. I mean, if you can find it, come back and let me know.
Yeah.
The Quran never refers to the Holy Spirit as being part of the Trinity. And so what I'm getting at is, it seems like there's a misunderstanding, at least to me, that the Quran doesn't seem to quite understand the Trinity. Then it doesn't, and if I could maybe take your perspective, but then it also seems to misunderstand even who Ezra was and how the Jews worshipped him. Then I also see the Quran quoting different sources, like the infancy gospel of Thomas, when Jesus is creating clay birds, and they fly. Like the only place that's never found in any of the 4 gospels, the only place that's found is in the an apocryphal work called the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. There is the whole situation where they're under a palm tree and Jesus gives birth and he speaks out of the cradle. That's out of the Arabic infancy gospel in the 7th century. And so my concern is that like Muhammad is not fully getting the facts correct.
No,
And
well,
his
he's
sources
sharing
correct.
more, right? Because this is he's adding like, hey, here are even more miracles that Jesus did, right? Same thing with
True,
Moses, like, hey, here are other stories that you don't know, right?
possibly.
I was actually reading one about how Moses obviously had this direct friendship with God, but then there's another person who also had like a different knowledge that God gave him, right? And so it shows that God is the one who gives all knowledge.
Sure.
But this is not in the Bible, right? And so that's also showing like, hey, I don't even think in the Bible it says that Jesus spoke as a baby, but in the Quran, one of the first things it says about Jesus is that Jesus spoke as a child, saying that I am the Messiah, right?
So it seems to me then that Muhammad would be validating sources that come outside of the New Testament canon that are
Well, how could he
spurious.
validate sources if he couldn't read, right? Or he couldn't
Well, I'm
write?
not saying that because I think he's hearing things that are being spoken in the area. And so what I'm saying is he's validating sources that are outside of the New Testament, which whatever, that's fine if he's getting direct revelation. But it seems to me the more likely explanation is that he's just parroting sources that people are talking about that we actually know are apocryphal sources that are forgeries that come in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 7th, 6th centuries that reflect apocryphal legends about Jesus that don't go back to witnesses whatsoever. And so that even have theology that would completely contradict anything that Muhammad would ever want to talk about. And so to me, that makes a little bit more of an explanation. And the reason here's I'll tell you where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
So bear with me for just a second.
Yeah.
When I look at the 4 gospels, as I was talking about with the previous caller, is I see these are people who are written by people that are very well informed, that are close up to the facts, and that they are very scrupulous. They're trying to get things right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so even from like a just completely secular standpoint, I'm going to take a look at that from a historical standpoint, and I'm going to go, okay, like what's the evidence for what I just said? Like, does that actually bear out? It does. There's a mountain of evidence for it. And in these stories about Jesus, every single place, he's understood as the Son of God who is crucified and who's been resurrected from the dead. And I don't find like any kind of Muslim Jesus, even if you want to say, well, he never really claimed to be God in those 4 gospels. That's where I would have the problem. That's why I guess I could see somebody looking at the Bible, sort of, not really, and saying Jesus really never claimed to be God. But I can't see them looking at the New Testament and saying Jesus was basically a Muslim.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's rage bait when people say that, when Muslims say that. I find it funny, but and maybe or may not, it's true, right? God knows best. But and obviously they use that like because the Islam just means like oneness with God, right? And so he was following the oneness of God, right? When people say Muslim, and so now, right, when you say like there's all this like historical evidence to the Bible, right? I mean, the exact same thing can be said about the Quran with the different hadiths, right? Where the companions, where we have first and last names that were.
Well, why did Yasser Qadi just go on record and say that there is no like historical argument that can be made for the validity of the hadiths, and it's just something that you have to take on faith?
Well, I mean, you could say the exact same thing about the gospel as well, right?
Well, that's where we would differ, as I would argue. So let me give you, if I could just give you some examples. Bear with me for just a minute here, and if you got to go at any point, just let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I also know because I was sitting in here waiting for a long time to get in. I don't want to take any more time from other.
You're the
people.
only one. You have a captive audience, buddy. You're the only one up right now.
Okay, fair enough.
So let me show you a little bit about what I'm talking about, and I'd just be curious to see how you as a Muslim would respond to something like this. Okay. So hopefully I don't crash my computer as I pull up these slides, because my computer is just being really, really weird right now. It's going kind of slow. So you would reject the crucifixion, right?
Yes. I
Okay.
believe that, yeah, like, he was raised up by God. But I also have
Okay.
the belief that Jesus would have done it, right? That's my own opinion, but I believe that if it came to it, his intentions were to get crucified, but he was saved before.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. No, I appreciate that. And so it is loading very slowly here. This is a good time to say, hey, everybody, if you can, join my Patreon. Maybe I can get a new computer and Starlink up in this piece, because this is Bush League.
And if
And
you
I just
haven't
work
subscribed to him,
part-time.
you got if
And
you watch this entire chat, you got to subscribe to the man, right? Like he's been
yeah,
in
yeah.
his faith. You got to give him respect or respect is due.
Okay. So let me show you a little bit what I mean
Okay.
with the reliability of the Gospels. And then I'm also going to talk about how that relates to Islam. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's coming up here. So did Jesus predict his own death and resurrection? Okay. You would say no, he doesn't, right? And I would say yes, he does. And so this is a catch-22, because if Jesus did predict his own resurrection, death and resurrection, this would falsify Islam one way or another, because if he didn't really die and or wasn't really crucified and resurrected, then that would make him a false prophet. And yeah, and or if he did, yeah. So basically, if he predicted it, it didn't come to pass, he would be a false prophet. If he did predict it, then he would be falsify Islam, because it contradicts the Quran, right? And so I'm going to skip some of this here, and I am just going to, these are some of the objections. I'm just going to give some of the evidence, okay? So in the four Gospels, Jesus predicts his death 18 different times, right? He says that he must be suffered, be rejected, killed, and rise. So we have multiple sources. I would say they're independent. They use diverse metaphors and repeated references. That is one mark of historical authenticity, but you could just say, well, the Gospels were corrupted. But actually, I would argue that the Gospels, and especially these particular narratives, offer little to no signs of later theologizing, right? So most passion and resurrection narratives lack church era theological language. They don't talk about atonement. They don't talk about forgiveness. They don't talk about sacrificial interpretation. This absence suggests that the sayings originated before post-Easter theological reflection, right? Early Christians consistently interpreted Jesus' death as redemptive, but the predictions where Jesus flat out has them, they often don't, which is just one small marker, and I'll admit that this is a small marker, that indicates authenticity, that they reflect Jesus's voice, not church's later theology. Now, the stronger points, and these are the stronger points, I'm going to give like a handful here of why I would say that the Gospels are reliable, is some of the embarrassing details that they can include, right? So in Mark 8,
Oh no. Did we just lose him? Yeah, what do I do? Well, I guess if you guys want to go subscribe to my channel and yap at me, I can link it in the comments after this. Also, some of your comments are pretty funny, but I'm gonna turn my camera and mic off because this is not my channel. Oh, okay, all right. The catch-22. I do like that. Um,
Maxwell can't.
yeah, I'm here.
Are you there?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
I'm
my
here.
gosh. This internet. Okay. I'm just going
Divine
to look at
intervention,
my
maybe.
yeah, a lot broke in. And
W the
anyway,
chat for Allah.
yeah, that was rough. Let me see what I got here. I don't know. I'm scared to even try to bring my slides back up,
For
honestly.
sure.
And so let me just pull it up so I just have notes so I
Yeah.
know what I'm up. Okay. So in Mark 8:31 through 33, it talks about Jesus predicting his death. And it says the Son of Man must suffer, be rejected, and killed, and after 3 days rise again. Let me fix our formatting here.
Mhm.
Peter rebukes Jesus, and Jesus rebukes Peter. And Jesus gets harsh. He says, "Get behind me, Satan." So this is a double rebuke. You have Peter, who's a church pillar, rebuking Jesus. You have Jesus calling Peter Satan. So I would say this is a highly improbable invention if this is just by early Christians, right? Now, early church tradition tells us that Papias, as well as Irenaeus, Clement, Tertullian, let us know that Peter was the source of Mark's particular gospel. And so what I'm saying here is basically this is very like embarrassing kind of testimony that you probably wouldn't see if this wasn't like an actual historical source. But then that's just like one example, this kind of like principle of embarrassment that it's unlikely that this is made up, where Jesus is very clearly predicting his death and his resurrection here. But then there's also the false testimony at Jesus' trial. So in Mark chapter 14, verses 56 through 59, it says that many bore false witness, but their testimony did not agree. We heard him say, "I will destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands." Now, the specific reference to 3 days doesn't seem like a random fabrication, and that their testimonies contradict each other shows us that there's probably some garbled memory. Now, here's where it gets interesting, Maxwell, is that there's no prior statement in Mark explaining this charge. It's just this kind of unexpected allusion. Jesus, that they just say that, like, hey, Jesus said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. But we don't see where that accusation was. Now, this would be very serious under Jewish law, so it's something that's unlikely for them to invent, right?
Mm.
So, what's up with that? Like, he never says this in the synoptics, but if we go over to John's gospel, in chapter 2, verse 18 through 21, Jesus says, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days, I'm going to raise it up." But what's weird about this is that John preserves the original statement behind the garbled trial version, but Jesus is saying predicted his death. And he mentions that this was like symbolic, right? So basically, Mark preserves the original accusation, but then John preserves the original claim. But then when you get to John's gospel, this charge never comes up. It's never brought back up. And
Mhm.
so you have these two like incidental details, these things that they said allegedly that actually kind of line up in a way that seems completely undesigned and that and coincides with one another, which I would say is like a mark of like historical truth, right? Like if John is just making up a story, he would have just included the same mention in the trial. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me give you some more examples here. Now, what's interesting is in this particular example where Jesus says, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up," in John's gospel. Um, he also mentions the fact that the crowd was angry with him, and they said that it took 46 years to build this temple. Will you raise it up in 3 days? Well, we actually know from Josephus that Herod the Great began the construction of the temple in 18 BC, and that from this date, Jesus' first confrontation of the temple would have been around 27, 28. Now, if we go over to Luke chapter 3, verse 1, it happens to mention that Jesus began his ministry in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. Now, we know from Suetonius that Augustus died in AD 14, but Tiberius had been his co-regent since AD 12, and their reign was dated from like an earlier point. So what this does is this puts John the Baptist's public ministry in the AD 26 to 27 period, just before the date that John indirectly discloses for Jesus's exchange with the Jews about the temple. So here we have Luke, Suetonius, Josephus, and John all converging on the exact same date regarding the exact same statement of Jesus predicting his death and resurrection. And then the garbled testimony is nowhere in the synoptics, but it ends up being in Mark's gospel at the particular trial. And so you have all of these sources just kind of incidentally, casually kind of fitting together, pointing to one particular thing. Now I'm going to give you one more, and then I will stop and get your thoughts on this.
For sure.
And again, if you got to go at any point, just let me know. There's
I'm
another
good.
place in Luke chapter 13, verse 31, where Jesus says basically some of his opponents come to him and they're like, hey, get out of here. Herod wants to kill you. And Jesus gets kind of sassy and sarcastic with him. And he says, they say that Herod wants to kill him. And he says about Herod, he says, you go tell that fox that, behold, I cast out demons and perform cures today and tomorrow. And the third day I finish my course. Nevertheless, I must go on my way, for it cannot be that a prophet should perish away from Jerusalem. And so there he predicts again that his impending death, right? Now, Luke places this after Jesus left Galilee and is traveling towards Jerusalem. We get that from Luke 13:22. I would put more of this on the screen, but I don't know what's going on with my computer right now. The jinns or the bad jinns or whatever the right word is. But anyways, but the warning refers to Herod Antipas, who ruled both Galilee and Perea. Now, we learn from Josephus that Antipas did rule Galilee and Perea. This is in Antiquities, chapter 17. Now, if Jesus is now in Perea, east of the Jordan, the warning about Herod's intent makes total geographical sense. But Luke never identifies the region. He doesn't even mention it. And he doesn't even mention Herod's jurisdiction, even though in other places he does mention where Herod was ruling over and where Pilate was ruling over and who was the high priest and all this other stuff. But in Matthew 19 and in Mark 10:1 and in John 10:40, all of those places all of those references place Jesus east of the Jordan just before the Passion. Matthew 19 explicitly ties this movement to his departure from Galilee, the same time frame of Luke 13. The Gospels don't even mention the name Perea, but the geography actually fits perfect with what Josephus describes as Herod's territory. And so basically we have, again, Josephus, some subtle comments from the gospel writers, all in this context where Jesus is predicting his impending death and resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And so does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you gave me a lot. Like, I'm not gonna lie, and so I'm definitely gonna look back and do my own research for sure.
Okay.
I think some of the most convincing things that you said was the building of the temple. I think that is actually the most convincing thing I've heard a Christian say to me. So I'm gonna do my own research, and so I thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely.
When it comes to the resurrection part and Jesus predicting it and like false idol or false god or false prophet, I don't necessarily believe that. I'm not convinced. Like I'm sure. I mean, I'm not sure, but that I think Jesus could have been known. Like he could have like not been told, or maybe even been told that yes, like you're gonna have to go die, or your soul is gonna have to go leave, right? But through the mercy of God, that he was taken up, right? That's kind of the more line of thinking I would take. That again, Jesus was going into this whole situation as he was going, like his intention was to get crucified, right? I believe that. But I wouldn't say like, and then again, through the mercy of God, he was taken. But that's my own opinion. That's my own ego speaking there too. Just
you would think that he was kind of mistaken, maybe then?
I wouldn't say necessarily mistaken, but it was like he was being tested, right? Like, will you go die for preaching this way of God, right? Is that what you're willing to die for? And I think Jesus, being as pious as he was, he would have done it. And so, and then through the mercy of God,
then
he
his
was protected.
I feel like then he would have made a false prediction because he said that he was going to die.
Yeah, and so his soul
it wasn't
was
just
taken.
a willingness. Yeah,
his soul was taken.
Yeah. But he didn't die though, right? Because he's coming. He's coming back, right?
Yeah, that's another thing. Like how we kind of say like when we say Muhammad, peace be upon him, right? We also use that for Jesus, saying that like his soul was taken, right? Like, and I guess in a different sense of being dead, right? It's not like he like died, but he's we believe his soul's gone, right? And so that's how I would see it, right?
Well, it's my understanding he comes back and
Yeah, he does come back.
then he dies, because in
Yes.
chapter 19 he has to die.
Yeah.
So are you saying he died twice? Like he
No.
died, he left his soul?
No,
Okay, so
no.
then it would be a false prediction though, because he's flat out saying
No,
he's gonna be crucified and die.
No, I also no. But yeah, it's not like he died in the traditional sense, right? But his soul left. And again, I'm not saying that yes, I think when Jesus said that, he's predicting his death, because that's what he is. He's like, hey, you are going all the way to death, right? You were going to die on the cross, but then through the mercy of God, he was taken, right?
Yeah, I feel like that. Well, think about, I did a whole stream on the whole, did Jesus predict his death and resurrection? I feel like what you would be saying here, and then I did have somebody else, so I probably should go to the next. And I apologize for all the internet issues.
No, you're good, bro. I appreciate your time.
But I feel like that's just kind of a radical, just respectfully, I would say that's like a radical reinterpretation of Jesus's words. And it seems to me like that would make him mistaken, which would make him a false prophet. But if you, yeah, man, I feel like that would be reinterpreting his words pretty radically. So,
sure.
But thanks for coming up, man. Maxwell, respectful guy. I am so sorry about the internet.
You're good, problems. Bro. I appreciate your time. I'm definitely gonna look into the temple rebuilding. I'm not fully convinced, to be honest. Especially the more I look into the Greek translations and the misinterpretations there through the English.
You can get an interlinear Bible. You can go right online and look at interlinear. They take the majority text of the Greek, which is based on the basis of tons of manuscripts, and then you can look at interlinear and see the words. You can go to the Society of New Testament Manuscripts, the Center Society, whatever the Center. I don't know. It's a CSMNT, I believe. And so they have all the manuscripts there. You can see them. You can actually like observe them yourself. There's not like some conspiracy of like,
no, I'm not saying
more divine Jesus. Yeah. And so the Greek is the English translators are really trying to get close to it, because you have versions like the NRSV.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying in the essence of the words, right? Like when they mean something, and it's hard to fully get that.
Well, you have scholarly translations that are not from authors, right? They're Christian translators. You have people who are from all kinds of different backgrounds coming to the same text, right? And they're translating it almost the same. So if you go to like the NRSV updated edition, not every scholar on there is a Christian. A lot of them are extremely liberal Christians that could care less, and a lot of them are agnostic, completely secular. Pretty much everyone is going to agree that the text that we have is the text, and English translations are not trying to pull a fast one. I'm not saying that there's not like some inflation, a little bit of some things at some points here and there, but it's very, very small. And out of none of those texts are you ever going to come up with a Muslim Jesus. So anyways, hope that's food for thought, Maxwell, and thanks again for coming up.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right. I am so sorry, guys, about all the tech issues. I do not know what's going on today. The double. Maybe I should have restarted my computer, restarted the router. I don't know. Muslims believe Muhammad is a prophet and the Quran is from Allah for one reason only. Muhammad says so. Yeah, I mean, would you rather trust a bunch of different authors that are all collectively saying the same thing, or just one guy's kind of trust me, bro? And so definitely. But good guy, Maxwell. Glad that he came up. All right, JJ, you're up, sir.
Hey, how are you, brother?
I'm good. How's it going?
I'm doing well. How's everything with you?
What's that?
How's everything? Can you hear me?
You're real faint, but I can hear you.
Okay, let me just fix my headphones. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. The only issue that I have generally is with the penal substitution of why, like, a God cannot forgive without the shedding of blood. I don't have any issues with the manuscripts. It's just like when I look at the penal substitution, like for me, a sacrifice has to be internal, meaning like Why wasn't Jesus separated from God like forever? That would have been a true sacrifice, right? You know what I'm saying? Like he knew before he died that he was going to be reunited with his father after 3 days. So would does that really make a sacrifice? I'm not trying to diminish a sacrifice. If you know what I'm saying, I'm just saying like he, in essence, knew that this was going to happen to him, and this is the way our humanity will be reunited, say, with him, the Father, and the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
Right. So that is what I'm trying to figure out.
You don't think somebody who spent their entire eternity with God being separated from the Father at a specific point wouldn't be like a great sacrifice?
Like
if you were always with
my mother passed away, right? That's a sacrifice. I'm not going to see her because she did not believe in Jesus. So if Christianity is true, she's already separated from me, right?
Okay.
So that's, I'm not saying she sacrificed herself or whatever, right? But like,
but we're talking about like an infinite person.
oh yeah. No.
Versus a finite person.
No. I understand.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not trying to diminish his. I'm not trying to like disrespect your beliefs or anything as well, right?
No,
This
you're
is
fine.
not what I do, right? It's like if God needs to see innocent blood before he can stop like being angry, like how do we reconcile that with love? Like, why would there need to be a blood sacrifice? Is what I'm essentially trying to get at.
So I'm gonna bake your mind a little bit here for a second. I don't think there has to be. I don't think he had to do it that way. I think he chose to do it that way.
Okay.
And the reason why I think that he
oh,
chose to do it that way is, well, think about it this way. If Jesus willingly does go to the cross and endure like a bloody and awful and horrible death and experience a separation from the Father, even if it is for 3 days, who knows like what kind of amount of time that felt like to him, right? And so because maybe time outside of this realm is different than time inside of this realm. If he did that, and we see that, I think that helps us see the seriousness and the awfulness of our sin. Because now, like if he says, if I just say, hey, you owe this great debt. Whoa, put your question. I got a banner going on. Let me get rid of that. Sorry about that. So if he does that, I think I greater see through the cross the awfulness of my sin. I greater see the willingness that God showed to reach into like the depths of my humanity and experience everything I experienced as a human being, to suffer, to be tempted in every single point as a human being, yet without sin. And his willingness to, he wasn't like an involuntary thing. God is like forcing Jesus to do this. Like he submitted his will to the Father. And so in doing that, that shows the lengths that God is willing to show me, both the awfulness of my sin, but also the greatness of his mercy at the same time. And so justice and mercy meet at the cross. And I see, okay, well, he did that for me. He took my place. And so what that makes me do is it makes me go, I want to serve this person. I want to trust this person. I want to follow this person because they entered into all of my suffering and the worst possible kind of suffering, and then defeated that. And so versus if God just was like, hey, here's a revelation, guys. Jesus is going to come and he's going to do miracles. And then he's going to go, here's the message. God forgives you. That's it. I think that could lead me to possibly maybe even trivializing my sin. And so I think that's part, not the full picture, but I think that's part.
No, that's a good answer. But my understanding is like God necessarily didn't have to create us. He knew the consequences would be like we're just a speck in
Sure.
in in this cosmic universe, we don't know how big it is. Like, we're just a speck. Like, he didn't necessarily need us and have to go through all of this. Because what I essentially understand is like with billions and billions and billions of people that have already come in this world, there's more souls that are lost than they're saved, essentially.
Yeah, but
S-
there are a lot of people who are saved.
Yeah,
And so what you
but
would have to say is, yeah, let me, if I could speak to that real quick. So
sure.
basically what you'd be saying is either God doesn't create, or maybe he creates a world where everybody freely accepts him, but that is only
Hmm.
like a handful of people.
Hmm.
Or God creates billions of people and he has maybe billions reject him. Um,
Hmm.
I think the smaller world has overriding deficiencies,
Hmm.
and maybe it's not because given, you know, human free will, he couldn't create a
Hmm.
world where just everybody accepts him.
No, no,
And if he
you're right.
could, like maybe that world would be vanishingly tiny, like maybe a handful of people. I mean, even in the Bible, like right away, he creates two people, and they go the wrong way, and then they have a
Hmm.
son, and then one son kills the other son,
Yeah.
and then by the time you even get to the flood, which is, you know,
Hmm.
however long that is later, the whole world except for one guy and his family are
Yeah.
righteous,
No.
and so
No. No. I understand. My theory is I like I'm not arguing against morality. This is not because we'll just go into a rabbit hole, essentially. So like you're in America, right, Eric? If I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
Okay. So someone like my grandfather, he was born in uh like Pakistan, right?
yeah,
And he all he understood was like all his friends understood was the Quran.
hmm,
Like that was like embedded in him
hmm,
like since he was young. That's that's what he was all exposed to. Like right now, if you even say anything, the Quran is corrupted. What is the Injil? Look, Muhammad did this, did that. He will not accept it because he's been programmed that. Does it really matter? Like he's not saved essentially because he was born in the wrong part of the world. Like
no, I don't think anybody's a geographical accident.
you
Do
wouldn't
you
say
think?
so?
Do you think no? God, if God is the one who is ordering the world through His providence,
Hmm.
then God is placing people in the world that even if they heard the gospel, they would reject it. In the case of your grandfather, if this is not hypothetical, if he's like this is really your
No,
grandfather,
no.
he ought to be able to see if he knows the Muslim sources, he should
Hmm.
see that there's something wrong.
Yeah, the thing
There's
is, he's too
also
old now to to go into the Gospels and
sure,
just believe in it at point blank. You know what I'm saying? Like his mind is not capable of like us of
sure.
like really doing that research and understanding. Be-
Well, I think people have
no, no, I'm
everybody
not
has
saying no. It's no. Some people like you look at even apostate AP. His parents are still Muslim,
sure.
right? Yeah, he even tried to like at one point. I listened to him. He tried to bring the gospels, but they're so indoctrinated into like because if they reject the Quran, they're gonna think, oh my God, what if this is the word of God? What if it's that what if? Because no one really knows, right? You could question all the sources, whatever, right? I think that's what people get entangled with. Like which mother would want to give up their son? Like AP gave up his parents to like preach against Islam. You know what I'm saying?
Do you
Like,
think that God knows what decision everybody would make, no matter what
oh yeah,
circumstances He put them in?
I think so.
Yeah. So if He knows what decision they would make, no matter what circumstance He puts them in,
Hmm.
um, and He arranges the times and places of where they're at, do you think wouldn't He know, like, even if somebody got the gospel or they were clear about what the gospel was, wouldn't He know, like, that they would reject it or not, even
No,
if they had it?
I think he would. Like for me, like I'm an agnostic at the moment. I'm
Okay.
not believing in like anything. Like God, he I think he causes hindrance as well for us. Like I've like you talk about him. Like the first time I ever read about Christianity is I read Bart Ehrman, right? But the thing is, his work has such like impact on me that even if I think like the Gospels are reliable, whatever, it will always go back to that. What if like he wrote this? Like,
Nah,
you know what I'm saying?
no, definitely not. Because I mean, Bart Ehrman is just sloppy. That's just facts, and I can give you
Mhm.
multiple examples.
No, I've
And
seen your
so
example. No, no, 100%.
yeah, just because there are intelligent people that reject Christianity, and you've been supposedly polluted by bad
I shouldn't have
scholarship.
read them.
Yeah, no, it's fine if you read it. I don't
Yeah,
care if you read it. It's probably
yeah.
good that you read it. But at the same time, like, no, like you can look at the facts. People can look at the facts objectively. You
Okay.
have the information, like you have the information. And so, but what I'm saying is you going back to the geography thing, right? I don't think that
Mhm.
it's a geographical accident for anybody being born in a certain place. I don't think we're saved by where we were born or whatever, because God could so arrange the world that people who never hear the gospel or are never fully informed of the gospel, he could arrange it in such a way that he knows that they would have rejected it anyways.
Mhm.
Now, they still have conscience. They still can see nature. They can still know God exists. They could still realize, like, I'm a sinner. And apart from God, I need mercy. And like somebody like Job or something like that, who Job talks about, like, oh man, if there was only a mediator between me and God, I could be made righteous, you know? And so I think people can see that. And that Romans even talks about in the first couple of chapters that that's a genuine path to salvation. It
Mhm.
just doesn't give us a hope
I
that
Yeah,
many
no,
people will receive that way. Let me
you're
finish the point
right.
real quick and then you can jump in.
No, I said no,
Um,
I said you're right.
but God in his providence, he knows what decisions we would make in
Mhm.
any given circumstances. And so if he knows, like in all possible worlds, if somebody even heard the gospel, they would reject it even if they heard it, then he would
Mhm.
just be like, well, you know, whether I send somebody to them or I don't send somebody to them, they're still going to be lost. And so if the hypothetical man in, you know, I don't know, 15th century Pakistan who only
Mhm.
knows Islam or something like that, he would know that they're going to reject it anyways. And so even if you put them in the 21st century United States of America, and so that it's like he's not doing anybody wrong. Also, he's still
Mhm.
giving them the light of conscience, and he's still giving them the light of nature. And a Muslim should be able to read the Quran and go, you know what, child marriage actually bad.
Mhm.
You know, like there are certain things in this book that are wrong. Wife
No, no,
beating,
100.
actually, that probably is not something that
Mhm.
agrees with my conscience. So, therefore, is this really a revelation from God? What is the true revelation? Let me really seek God with all of my heart and not just assume
Mhm.
that my moms are telling me the truth. And I believe that
Yeah.
God would reveal himself to somebody, even if it has to be through a dream. I mean, we do hear Muslims having dreams and coming to Christ. And so it's not as if like people are just completely like in the
No, no,
dark
I
and
hear that.
ignorant.
I've heard of those. And this is just my last point before I go, because I
Yeah,
know
you're
there are
good.
other people waiting. Like, I know this is gonna be a weird point. Why can't I have an experience like Paul did?
Well, why couldn't you have experience like Thomas
Like, I
does? You
prayed
know,
for it.
yeah.
Like,
So again, like it goes back to, and I'm not judging you. Okay.
yeah.
First of all, you're not dead. Your life isn't over yet, right? And so you don't know what kind of experience you're going to have. I've had a personal, you know, experience with God, and so I've had multiple things that I think would be hard to say that was just my own imagination. Okay,
Mhm.
but I God again knows how we're going to react and how we're going to respond, and He knows what it
Mhm.
takes to get us to that point where we can even receive Him. I don't think I had an experience with God until I was basically ready. Okay, after actually, if I would have had the same experience that I had when I was 15 years old and a hardened atheist and into all kinds of stupid stuff, and I'm not saying
Mhm.
you're into stupid stuff. I'm just saying my own moral framework and where I was at right now. I was not ready. Okay,
Mhm.
and so it's just you're bringing up kind of a problem of divine hiddenness, but yet like again, we could always imagine that there's like more evidence, but there is good
Mhm.
evidence that Jesus rose from the dead historically. There is good
Mhm.
evidence that Jesus claimed to be God. There is good evidence that hey, Paul was not a liar and Paul was not deceived. So why can't we just accept his testimony? There is good
Mhm.
evidence that there's modern miracles today. And so there's nothing wrong with receiving something on the basis of somebody else's testimony
No,
even if we don't have direct evidence. Could you have a direct experience with God? I think it's very possible if you really are seeking him with all your heart and like, hey, I genuinely want to follow God. But even I think we're bad at even reading our own hearts. I mean, even as when I was an unbeliever, there was part of me that wanted it to be true. And there was definitely a part of me that didn't want it to be true. And I think if we're all honest with ourselves, there's that conflict going on the inside of us. And so I would say, hey, look at the actual testimonies from the people who experienced the resurrection or experienced the resurrected Jesus, and look at the actual data, because if you had a personal private experience, you could gaslight yourself into enough doubt and unbelief to say, maybe that was fake, maybe that was phony, maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, maybe I had, whatever, maybe somebody gave me a bad hit of acid and slipped it in my drink. I don't know, you know what I'm saying?
No,
And so
what book would
so
you recommend for me? Like, I've read lots of them, like something that's like thought provoking, like for the Gospels reliability.
for the Gospels, something kind of entry level, easy to understand, but deep enough to where it's got a lot of substance, is Testimonies to the Truth by Lydia McGrew is really good. That's on the reliability of the Gospels. Can We Trust the Gospels by Peter J. Williams. Both of those would be a good start.
Peter J. Williams.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Good question.
Thank you for taking my call.
Yep.
All right, you take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
All right. We'll do one more. Hopefully, no more internet problems there. All right. Avzal, I guess you're on stage, bro.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Yeah. Hi, Rick. Thank you for taking me in. So I am not a Christian. I was born and brought up in a Muslim family.
Okay.
And I would say these Islamic dilemma arguments have. I was agnostic. I'm a generic theist, but I was agnostic about the religion. And the Islamic dilemma arguments have convinced me that probably Islam is false. So I'm just looking into Christianity and other religions also, but the Christianity is my primary candidate currently.
Cool.
So yeah, so I watch a lot. I have watched a lot of inspiring philosophies videos, and so I would like to know what just correct me if I'm wrong. Like, how do you argue for the resurrection of Jesus? Like,
sure.
Just briefly, I'll just put the argument and you tell me whether it is correct. So do you argue for the general reliability of gospels, and then based on data in the gospel that you find, what is the best explanation? Is it resurrection or is it something else?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and awesome, great to hear your journey. The Islamic dilemma works, people. So when it comes to the resurrection of Jesus, I would make like a two-step argument. And so one, I would just say that anytime you're dealing with eyewitness testimony, there are three explanations, right? People are lying, people are deceived themselves, they're mistaken, honestly mistaken, or they're telling the truth, right? And their testimony reflects what really happened. And so I would say that the disciples, the content of their claim makes it really difficult that they're lying, because they claim to see the resurrected Jesus over a period of 40 days and that they were multi-sensory experiences, right? So they saw him, he invited him to touch him, they ate broiled fish with him, they shared meals together, he appeared to them in groups and different things like that. It really makes it difficult to say that they were mistaken. And the content or the context in which they made the claim makes it really difficult to say that they're lying. And so they proclaimed Jesus in Jerusalem, the city where Jesus was just crucified, 40 days after his death. And also, we're willing to go labors, dangers, sufferings, and even in some cases, martyrdom before their faith, right? And so I don't think they were mistaken, and I don't think that they were lying. Now, in order to get to that argument, I'm going to need some data. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw from not just the general reliability of the Gospels. I'm going to argue that the Gospels are highly reliable. And so what the Gospels are they're written by 4 different authors who are very close up to the facts. they are scrupulous and they are knowledgeable. They're people who constantly are telling the truth. They really know what they're talking about, and they really show themselves close up to the original apostles and Jesus, right? And so therefore their testimony reflects the unembellished testimony of what the disciples claimed, right? And so there's a number of ways that you could argue for the high reliability of the Gospels. You could talk about like internal clues, like undesigned coincidences, and how the Gospels like casually dovetail into one another in this like subtle and very undesigned way, where one person says one fact and then another person says something else, and they coincide in a way that doesn't look like it's fiction or stuff that's being made up. And also they do the same. They relay facts of history, not just like major details, but they get a lot of small, minute details. They get hard things right that shows that they were very knowledgeable and they were close up to the events that they're talking about. And there are hundreds and hundreds of examples of these kind of things that we could put together, and it makes a cumulative case that the Gospels are they're very reliable books.
Yeah. So this argument about the Gospels being reliable, I'm audible, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear.
It's interesting. I mean, it does raises my credence on the reliability of Gospels, but I have this background intuition, like that. I mean, if I read the Gospels, I won't say I've read it like deeply or anything like that, but there are a lot of what you might say miraculous claims, and I'm not saying that miracles are impossible or like they cannot be proven, but it's just that just by reading the Gospels and looking into the information, just what the Gospel presents me, it appears that there are a lot of miraculous claims, and it reduces my credence that because I give low prior credence to like any miraculous claim, and I agree that if you get enough evidence in principle, I mean, you can prove a miracle, but general reliability of Gospels for me, it just pushes me to say that okay, the unembellished part, if we just say use that language, the part that is talking about mundane things like Jesus meeting people and stuff like that, talking to them, giving parables, that seems reliable. But the parts that are miraculous, like I don't know, maybe they are reliable, maybe they are not. So so this argument basically comes from the fact that there are some things in the Gospel. I mean, you would have seen the Jubilee video where Alex was discussing with Tan about how did the like saint got how I think it's in Luke's Gospel or Mark's Gospel. Mark's Gospel, that the saints got resurrected and came to Jerusalem. Like this is like a very unprecedented event. Yeah. So I'm not saying it's impossible or like it cannot be proven, but it just reduces the prior probability that Gospels are reliable for me. So like, do you think the evidence will completely overpower these aspects in the Gospel?
Well, yeah, because what you would have to look at is, if that's true, what you're saying is you're positing like a schizophrenic author. So they're showing themselves to be close up to the facts. They're showing themselves to be like scrupulous when they're just talking about mundane things, and they show themselves to be like very knowledgeable. But then like right when it's a miracle, we're going to say, nah, just making that part up. And so then you have kind of like a schizophrenic author who is just like super honest, super knowledgeable. Seems like they're relaying real testimony about mundane things. But then you get to a miracle and it's like, well, that's completely made up. And so if there is a God who exists, who possibly even exists, and he wants to make himself known in an unmistakable way, then the only way he's going to be able to do it is through a miracle. And so therefore we have to be at least open to the possibility that we can look at the testimony and evaluate it and rule out honest mistakes or lies, right? And so what you'd have to find in the Gospels, if there is the case that they're just making this stuff up, is that you'd have to find evidence that they are the kind of people who just make things up. They lie. They distort the truth. And so there you would be trying to look at, like, I don't know, contradictions and other kind of internal clues in the text to show that they're just kind of making up a story and piecing this together.
Yeah, I think to progress, I think it would be better to, if you tell me anything, any hard fact that Gospels get right, which is like very unlikely if the author is not scrupulous or like very close to the fact. Like it would be better because
Yeah,
yeah,
I can't really give you. Go ahead.
undesigned coincidences are interesting, but
Mhm.
I mean, I am not very moved by it. I will be honest about it. I mean, they support the case that increases the probability, but some kind of like hard fact about of Jerusalem or the close by area where Jesus lived or something like that we can verify. We had verified.
Well, we have the thing about a cumulative case, because what you're asking me to do is to just kind of give you one kind of big piece of evidence. But the
Okay.
thing about a cumulative case is all you got to do is just go, what is the likelihood of each external confirmation or undesigned coincidence on the hypothesis that this is eyewitness testimony and not just embellishment. And so you have to like enough little pieces can add up to one big piece, basically the equal weight of one big piece. And so you have to look at it from a bigger picture. It's cumulative. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time. I do got to go to work pretty soon. But so I could give you like an in-depth case, but you could also go to talkaboutdoubts.com and we do free one-on-one private Zoom calls. And we could give you like a whole bunch of examples, tons. And so we'd be happy to do that. And I can also recommend books. The other thing that I would say, just based on what you said, is it seems like because of the presence of miracles that lowers the prior view. So I would also look at like evidence for modern miracles that we have today, because if those happen, and they're always happening in a Christian context, I've never seen them happen in a Muslim context or a Hindu context, ones that actually pass a high criteria, then that would have to change our background beliefs a little bit, so that when we're reading the Gospels and we see Jesus healing the blind, but then we have stories like Greg Spencer, who basically was a semi truck driver and lost his sight due to juvenile macular degeneration, and basically was learning how to live his life as a blind man with like a guide dog and white cane and everything else, and was on disability, and then suddenly receiving his sight at a church conference while he was in prayer. And it's just medically impossible for that to even happen. And it happened in that setting, to the point where he could actually go back to work, and he was investigated for fraud because they thought like, you can't just be blind and then not blind. And like, no, all the medical evidence show that he really did have juvenile macular degeneration, and therefore he could go back to work and drive trucks again. And you have a bunch of testimonies like that, then to me that increases the plausibility that like, wait a second, like these things actually do happen. I can't just rule out the Gospels every time they tell me something that's weird. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think since you are out of time, you have to go. I'll which site did you say I can reach out to?
Yeah, this is an awesome resource. And it's talkaboutdoubts.com. There's a link to it in any description of my normal videos, not the live streams, but any of my normal videos. If you click the link, there is a in the video description, there's a link you can click on. And then we do one-on-one Zoom calls or two-on-one Zoom calls. You don't have to be a believer. It could be a doubting Christian or somebody who's interested in Christianity but just has doubts. And we could go through me or others that are counselors. We have tons of different counselors from all kinds of backgrounds. Yeah. We could go through all kinds of evidence, whether it's for modern miracles or whether if it's for reliability of the Gospels, reliability of Acts. I've been on many of those calls with my friend Jonathan McClatchy, and they are, not to toot our own horn, but they are awesome because the evidence really is overwhelming, and we could just pile it on, and we could do even multiple calls if you need it. We have Discord group you can join after going through one call, and so
I am in that Inspiring Philosophy Discord group. I don't know.
Awesome.
Something.
Yeah.
So, do you recommend any books like because I am like in popular media, like we are very much aware of like Bart Ehrman or
Mhm.
like this Myth Vision podcast puts a lot of videos. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I would like, I mean, I don't want to, I won't want to have answer to every other objection, but it would be
Yeah.
nice to have some kind of an idea, like where the kind of attack is generally from. Like Myth Vision podcast people, they, I think Derek Lambert, yeah,
Yeah.
he generally criticizes the gospel from the sorry, not mytho history, archetypal criticism.
Yeah.
Like it's very simple. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not saying I'm convinced by that, but it's just
Mhm.
being aware of the criticism will help me not to
Mhm.
be like shocked by some like argument made by textual critics, and
Yeah.
I would say it will smoothen my process if I eventually become a Christian or something like
Yeah. So I have a recommended and the same thing that I told you about in all the descriptions of my videos. I
that.
have a book list, and so you can click on that. Two that I just would say, like right off the top of my head, I said to the previous guy, is Testimonies to the Truth by Lydia McGrew. Is like a kind of a simple, like good entry point. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
The Historical Tell by Luke Vandewey is another good one.
Okay.
I would say Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, Richard Bauckham. I would say Historical Reliability of the Gospels by Craig Blomberg.
Mhm.
And then Can You Trust the Gospels by Peter J. Williams. Or
Okay.
even older books like William Paley as A View of
Okay.
the Evidences of Christianity that you could just download for free because it's
Okay.
open, it's public domain.
Okay.
It's older,
So
but it still holds up.
do you take questions on these books? Like if I have a doubt or anything on the doubts, like
Oh
talk
yeah,
about doubts. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
100%,
Yeah.
100%,
Yeah. That's nice. Yeah.
absolutely.
That's nice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we can walk through Jonathan and I have been on calls where we've just always talked about is the objections raised by like Bart Ehrman or Myth Vision or whoever. And we can walk you through, why we think a lot of those things don't work. So yeah, definitely avail yourself to all of those resources.
Yeah.
But we would absolutely love to talk to you. And that's really all I'm trying to do with these
Yeah.
lives is just kind of give people a
Yeah.
taste because you're
I
going to get way
appreciate
more
your
help.
hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate
You're
your
going to
hard
get,
work.
yeah, you're going to get way more help if we could just sit and talk to you for an hour and a half over Zoom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I guess you will have to go, and I'll also leave. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming up. Sorry I didn't have more time. I would have
No,
loved to
no,
walk
it's
through
fine. It's
examples, but
fine. Thank you
yeah.
for giving me the resource.
Yeah, you bet, man. All right. Well, thanks guys so much for joining. A brother has to go to work. And so I am so sorry about some of the technical difficulties. I think that threw me off a little bit and made me a little more I don't know, marble mouthed than normal. It's kind of hard to go through stuff when you can't share your screen and do the things. And so, but anyways, appreciate you guys tuning in, and I'm sure it'll be better on the next one. And until then, stay gangster, y'all.